Well, welcome to another edition of What's So Funny, the show that probes the minds, the psyches, the brains, and even the minds of the people who make the funny. This week, a special treat for you. In studio here, we have a big lineup of guests. Paul Provenza and Penn Jillette, the people who brought you the classic movie The Aristocrats. And Brian McKim from Shecky Magazine, and Gary Gulman and Alonzo Bowden from Last Comic Standing, the fantastic show that got canceled just as they were about to air the final episode of it. And now, a man who is here tonight to tell us all about those people, Mr. Guy McPherson.
Actually, Kevin, they're not in studio. They're not even here. This is all old stuff, Kevin.
What? No, don't do that. After all that work I went through, and I'm holding my microphone up by my
the masking tape is broken.
Can you believe that? A microphone held by masking tape, and it's not staying on. It's falling off. I can't believe that. That is unbelievable. What does masking tape come to these days?
We do have an all-star lineup here on the show, even though they're not with us. They're with us in spirit. God bless them. These are interviews that I did back in July. I think it was July when I was out at the Montreal Comedy Festival, otherwise known as Just for Laughs.
Juste pour rire.
Juste pour rire. Yeah. That's right. And I was the first interview was with Paul Provenza, a great stand-up comic. Oh, jeez. That mic is heavy. Paul Provenza, who is a stand-up comic that I remember from the 80s. He was quite big then, and now he's more behind the scenes, and he directed the movie The Aristocrats. And the guy who produced it, put up big money for it, was Penn Jillette. You know him from Penn and Teller, very funny magical group, duo. And so I was up in their hotel room, or the room that was set up for interviews.
Up in their hotel room.
Yes. And we start off with Paul Provenza, and then eventually Penn Jillette wakes up and joins us.
Wakes up.
It's about 24 minutes, so sit back and enjoy it. It's what it is. Here's Penn Jillette and Paul Provenza. And we're on, I believe, with Paul Provenza. Paul, and the filmmaker of The Aristocrats. Were you the director? What was your job exactly?
I was the director. Penn and I are listed in all the literature and on the posters and things as filmmakers because while I directed the project, it's just not right that Penn only be credited as executive producer because his heart and spirit and vision and integrity are such a huge part of this. And he is he was astonishing to work with in that, and I'll never get a chance to make a movie like this again, where the money man, the investor, is also of such a high level of creative integrity. And all he would say to me was, "Look, whenever we talked about anything in the movie, he would always say, if there's any argument here, you win. Because the last thing he wants is art done by committee." And so he was just amazing. And nobody will ever get an opportunity like this, and I certainly won't again, where the guy who's responsible for all the, for everything about the movie sits back and goes, you know what, it's not a personal enough vision. Please, go further.
Were there many arguments?
None whatsoever. Absolutely none whatsoever. But he prefaced them all by saying, if there is an argument, it's, you win because I want it to be one vision. He goes, I don't want it to be, done by committee. I don't want it to be compromised in any way. So he was just amazing. So he is without a doubt, a filmmaker of this project, even though I'm credited as a director.
And well, he was there in a lot of the shots too, wasn't he?
Oh, he was there for almost every shoot and had a huge, huge effect on the final outcome because Penn would, Penn's just he loves laughing, he loves comedy, and everybody in this movie is either a friend or an acquaintance who's become a great friend since then. And the whole premise was, we didn't want it to feel like we were making a movie. We wanted it to feel like we were hanging out with friends. And so while I was doing what I needed to do to get the movie done, he was loosening everybody up and having a great time. And the hardest problem we had in editing was working around Penn's laugh. So he really gave everybody a nice life in it.
But that adds a nice feel to it too, having his laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. We couldn't get it all out, but I'm telling you, all you'd hear wall to wall is Penn's laugh if we didn't cut out a little bit of it.
So whose idea was it originally? This film about a joke?
It was both of us. We had talked about doing something like this for a while because we were both fans of the joke, and we had heard people tell the joke, and we always remarked on how it seemed like something else was going on with this joke. Something, it meant more to us than it meant to anybody else who knew the joke. We would just talk about it a lot, and we talk about different versions that we heard, and whenever either of us was with Gilbert Gottfried or something, we'd always try and get him to do it for other people and stuff, and we just thought it would be really fascinating to hear a number of versions in a row. And then Penn got really, really deep into jazz and bebop because he's also a musician and he plays upright bass, and he was really, really, really working hard and focusing on bebop. And it struck him how, we know about improvisation in jazz. We've seen different actors do the same theater role. We've seen painters do the same still lifes, but we've never actually seen that in comedy, because good comedy, by definition, they wouldn't do the same kinds of things. So we never get a chance to explore the notion of, well, what if the playing field is even? What would each individual bring to it? And this joke was the opportunity to do that. And we thought, we knew it would be absolutely hilarious, and we thought it would reveal something about the art of comedy and the creative process and improvisation. And we figured some other things would come out of it, but we had no idea that it would be as rich and interesting as it ended up being.
So it's not just a movie about here's a joke told 100 different ways. There's so many other levels to it.
Yeah, there are a lot of levels to it, and we shot about 150 hours of footage. And I watched and watched and watched it and transcribed it all myself, so I really got inside it and started to feel that there were ideas and themes that were emerging. Of course, each individual was just performing and having fun and hanging out with us, but when you look at 150 hours of it, you start to see certain ideas emerge and patterns emerge. So when we went to edit it, we tried to do the same thing. We tried to have all those ideas and patterns emerge, for the audience as well. And in the aggregate, it became very revealing, certainly about all those things that we expected: art and the craft of comedy, and the the value and importance and mystery of improvisation, and about the individuality, how each comedian really can take this same dopey old joke and do something extraordinary and unique with it. But then it also became about culture. It became about taboos. It became about questions of taste and integrity and ideologies, and it just turned out to be something much rich that operated on so many more levels.
It's improvisatory, but there's only so much you can do with that, isn't there? I mean, how base can you get?
Actually, apparently not. There is not just only so much you can do. And I defy you to find where the end of the creative experience is. It's just astonishing how people go on and on and on. And every time you think you've heard it all and there's nothing new that can come along, somebody will come along and give you something new that you could never have imagined. It's absolutely remarkable.
When did you first hear the joke?
I heard the joke when I was just a baby comic. I was probably maybe 20 or something like that, and I had just started doing stand-up a year or two before that. And I actually have an emotional connection with the joke because I associate it with that time in my life where I found a sense of community, and I found what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I found this great sense of, you know what, I'm not alone. There are other people who look at the world a little differently than I do. So it happened at a very special moment in my life, which may be why I've always had a fascination with it.
Any idea on the joke's origin?
Nobody knows for sure, but we have reasonably placed it back to the mid-19th century firsthand. There's a gentleman in the film named Jay Marshall who actually tells the joke for the first time you actually hear the joke in the movie. And Jay Marshall just passed away several weeks ago, sadly, at the age of 94. And he was a living, breathing showbiz encyclopedia. He was in vaudeville as a child. He was from the world in which the joke takes place. And he remembered hearing it as a little boy, as like a 6 or 7 year old in vaudeville from an old guy at that time who remembered hearing it when he was a kid. So we, first-hand account, are able to at least place it back to the middle of the 19th century, which is pretty far back for a joke that's making audiences laugh today. But probably nowhere near as far back as it actually goes. And it's impossible to find out how.
And probably back then it would have been way more of a shocker. I mean, it still is, and I'm sure you'll have people walking out of the theater here, but standards have changed, haven't they? I mean,
but you know what? In 10 years, there'll be things that people are able to use that is, that will shock people or push their boundaries in some way that we can't imagine right now, and that just keeps going on and on. So,
well, someone in the film took a racial slant with it, and that was the one where you go, oh, geez, you can't say that.
Yeah,
right?
well, and that's interesting because back in the middle of the 19th century, that probably wouldn't even worked in the joke. So it's just it's like a living, breathing animal and changes and evolves.
As an outsider, I was having a little trouble believing the concept that there would be this joke that comics only told to comics, and it'd be like a secret handshake or something, and that there'd be something because there are so many filthy comics, right? There's a nasty show, and you can hear practically anything on stage, and why would this have been kept away from the general public for so long?
Well, it wasn't kept away from the general public by design, first of all. Also, let me clarify any misconceptions about this. I mean, this is a joke that, you don't hear comedians doing old jokes anymore. I mean, that has been, the art form shifted and moved away from that, 50, 60 years ago to where people started actually crafting their own material and using their own voices. So it's just not a natural thing to hear a comedian get up on stage and tell a joke like you would hear at a party or something like that. They write their own material, they do their own routines. So it's not a joke that you would hear on stage by a comedian, and it's just a joke that comedians have told each other backstage after late nights of shows and hanging out with friends. Sometimes it comes up and it becomes this little thing, and not all the time anyway. I mean, it's not something that comedians think about or work on. It's just Penn and I thought this little piece of minutia that most comedians wouldn't think twice about could reveal something interesting because it had this longevity and this ubiquity. But it's, nobody really gave it any thought or attention. It didn't mean that much to anybody. But when one hears the joke and one goes outside the rarefied world of comedy, or musicians also love this joke, by the way, which kind of makes sense when you see it, because musicians and comedians, there's a lot of just we're different from the rest of the world going on. But when you hear this joke and you try and tell it outside that rarefied world, you learn pretty quickly that that's really, really dangerous. You're not going to tell this around the Thanksgiving turkey. This is a thing that just you have to feel comfortable and safe doing it. So it stayed among the world of comedians just because we know that we don't have to explain ourselves, whereas it's not really made it out into the general public because the levels at which it operates aren't immediately obvious.
And so then, who is the film for? Is it for the comedy nerd who just loves stand-up? And by the way, it's great to see a film with all these stand-ups from many generations in it as well.
Wonderful thing that happened, isn't it? So many people got on board that it became, as George Carlin called it, a snapshot of the art of stand-up at the turn of the century, which is just wonderful. That's really great. That's a great part of it, and what an opportunity to hang out with all of them, as we're making this. But it's not... I'm sorry, what specifically was your question again?
No, I forget. No, it was who is the film for?
Well, we made the film for ourselves. We had feelings and thoughts about this, and we had a vision. And Penn allowed me to explore my feelings and vision on this, and keep it very, very personal. So it was really made just for us, just for the two of us, and we were successful enough in elucidating that love and that respect for comedy and the craft and the art and all the people in the movie, that anybody can get that, who is Moby Dick written for? Is it written for sailors or whalers, or is it written for oceanographers or pirates? Who's it written for? You know what I mean? It's a similar kind of thing. It's just a true story about a human experience that happens to be a rarefied world, but the things that we all relate to are there. And that's the other interesting thing about it, because while it's filthy and it's obscene and it's vulgar, without a doubt, I want to make that clear to everybody, because the last thing we want is somebody to go in the movie that's not going to enjoy themselves. We do not want people to go and expect their minds to be changed about this. If somebody loves a good dirty joke and loves having a good time and getting loose and down and dirty, they will love this movie. If that's not someone's cup of tea, they absolutely should go see something else. But having said all that, when people see the joy that's happening in this film, and they see the love of art and craft that's going on, and the freedom that people are celebrating and reveling in, that speaks to everybody, and a lot more people than we expected are getting it and appreciating it. It really is. I mean, as obscene and vulgar and vile as the language in this film is, we think of it as a love story, really. And we're not kidding. Seriously. It's just, you'll never find a movie, I mean, name a movie that has no sex, no violence, no conflict, and no hostility whatsoever.
Well, there's spoken hostility towards members of the family.
Actually, it seems to me like that family's really loving each other quite a bit. A little too much, if you will.
Well, maybe you should have that as a tagline, the Aristocrats, a love story.
It would be. But again, we wanted to be so clear. We didn't want to get fancy, and we didn't want anybody to misconstrue what's going on here. I mean, it's like if you want to come into the back room and hang out with our friends, the language is going to get a little rough. And if you have no problem with that, oh boy, are you going to be privy to stuff that is really special.
I'd love to see the TV network version. When they buy the rights, it would be like the trailer, I guess.
Well, actually, we did a version which at the time we were calling the Ashcroft version, with all the curse words, all the things that you can't say on television bleeped out. It's almost funnier than the movie itself. How non-stop. I swear to God, I'm sure there are satellites picking up Morse code. It's really funny. Penn Jillette, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, guy. Nice to meet you. Come on in. He was just. Oh,
Very well.
stick over here.
I'm closer because.
I'll give you plenty of level.
Okay.
Really? Okay. He was just saying what a tough guy you were to work for, and.
I am that. I'm certainly that. Okay, I'll move over. You're looking like a schmuck reaching across like that. So pathetic. I'll move over here. What are you running? What are you running that you have to reach across with your little bike?
It's a mini disc recorder.
Well, then you should be fine.
It's the first time I've used it.
Oh, that's why you're doing this schmucky thing.
Well, no. This is very directional. This is for broadcast. This is for the print.
You have more redundancy than NASA.
Thank
There'd
you.
be 14 astronauts alive if they were as careful as you.
Thank you very much. And it's plugged in, too, just in case the battery dies.
You don't hear every day.
Yeah. I take it as such. So what's the controversy now with the film?
Controversy with the film. It's just, what are you talking about? Who?
With the theaters? Or
AMC is one schmuck, one guy who got enough power to own a chain and then decides to pretend he's little junior P.T. Barnum, little junior Houdini. Oh, I can get some publicity for AMC. And he decides that after showing violent anal rape in Reversible and showing a burlesque of 9/11 in War of the Worlds, he'll put his foot down on this movie of people laughing and telling jokes and swearing a little. And you have to ask yourself, even in a totally non-cynical way, he picked the one movie that came along that doesn't have a studio behind it. So if he went up against Spielberg and those guys, they would punish him for acting like a fool. But no, we can't. We won't get another movie out ever, probably. Maybe in 3 years. Then what are we going to go, oh, we're not going to let AMC do it because of that thing no one remembers 3 years ago. So it's one guy thinking, ooh, I'm in show business, kind of, because I bought the store. Maybe I could have a little fun with the press. He's trying to be in the tradition of P.T. Barnum and Houdini, and he's an impotent, rich old man. And we won't play his game. We're supposed to go, oh, and we're repressed, our movie can't get out. We go back and forth in the press, and he gets more famous, and we make more money, and the answer is no. Whoever you are, we're not playing your stupid game. We made a movie, people like it, and you don't have a monopoly.
And this is probably a good thing for you, isn't it? Any kind of negative publicity?
You do the math. X, number of theaters will not show us. We get Y amount of added publicity. Do those two things even out? We don't know. I don't think anybody will know, and even after it happens, nobody will know. It might cost us some money. It might gain us some money. It'll probably cost us some, but not a lot. And who cares? He has more money than us, but we're happier than him, and we have bigger dicks that work.
And laughing a lot more.
A lot more.
I guarantee that.
The dedication to this film was for Johnny Carson. Why?
Conceptually, it's because it was Johnny Carson's favorite joke, and he's the most important person to comedy of this time. The more emotional reason is that we were writing emails, and he was talking about this joke a lot and very much wanted to see the movie, and I had a date to show it to him right after Sundance, and he died during Sundance. So there's an emotional connection and also a logical connection.
I'm wondering, you said you shot 150 hours. What was left out? Was this sort of the opposite? You put in all the filthiest stuff and you take out?
No. I mean, people did a number of variations on it. People did entirely different takes on the joke. Some people just, as I said, we basically went to hang out with people. Making the movie was, secondary. And as we were hanging out with them, sometimes they would just go off on other things that weren't pertinent to the movie per se. And we wanted to give as much time in the movie to as many people as possible, so we had to make certain choices. But no, there's this endless font of hilarious stuff and real smart insights and really beautiful human moments by artists.
Like I say, I enjoyed the fact that you have comics from all the generations, right? How did you sit down and come up with a list, or how did it work, who you chose?
No, you're just pretending in all these questions that this is being run by an organization, like every other thing, that there's product involved here. This is two guys. They made a movie about their friends. Our list was based on who we had in our Rolodex. That expanded by some people, like talking to Eric Idle, and then Eric Idle says, "Have you got Billy Connolly?" And we said, "No, we don't know him." And he goes, "Let's get him in." I mean, very, very much. If you were 12 years old and you pictured how movies were made, like you said, well, I guess you get a friend and you talk about it, and then you get some cameras, and then you go and get other friends, and then I guess you put some of the stuff in the movie. That's exactly what was made. There was no conversations with studio executives where they talked about acquiring talent. It was calling your friends.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, maybe the only reason the movie is so good. It may have nothing to do with us. It may be just that we short-circuited the process that creates mediocrity.
So these two guys just making a movie, did you dream that it would get to this stage, or have this?
We didn't have time to dream. We have other jobs.
How long was it in the making, by the way?
4.5 years.
It's closer to 5 at this point.
5 years, as I said.
5 years from now.
5.5 years. I would think maybe about 5.5 years now. Maybe 6. It's been about 6 years now.
Well, actually, we can narrow this down because we first shot in early 2001.
So it's like 7 years. About 7.5 years.
I think it would be 14, I think.
I think it would be 8, 14. My math has, we started the movie, the first one we did was backstage at the Sullivan Show.
Right.
Actually, it was Talk of the Town.
Right.
So that was 48.
Right.
So it's been since 48.
But those kinescopes have not been preserved,
Well,
so we couldn't use that
use some of the
footage.
kinescopes. We use a little bit of the kinescopes.
We use the SAM kinescopes.
Some of the stuff looks like it's
Some of it looks like kinescopes, yeah.
We started in 2001.
Yeah.
Did you receive any resistance from your friends who said, yeah?
The French resistance. We didn't ask anybody more than once. We would call up and say, we're doing this movie. You know how people play jazz and they improvise over the same song. Want to do the same thing with comedy, doing the Aristocrats. And then everybody said yes before I finished asking. And those that didn't, they said, I'll get back to you. I never called them again. It's not like we need people for the movie. We didn't need anyone. We needed everyone. So it's kind of like if you met somebody and you thought they were kind of cool and you called them up and asked them out for coffee the next day and they go, I can't really make it. You don't say, why? Because you don't like me? Why? Because I'm ugly? Why? Because you just say, okay, and you don't call them again. Same thing with the movie.
And what was the final number of comics that made it into the film?
Nobody's actually been able to nail that down, but it's about 100. It's close.
Yeah.
It's about 100.
A little over 100, but
101,
it depends. There's a lot of questions over whether you count the Onion staff as 1, or whether you count the Onion staff as 5, or whether you count, South Park, is that 2 people, is that 1? So it's around 100.
Or 5 kids. You don't know.
Who knows?
Now, did Now, Eddie Izzard said that he hadn't heard the joke before, and so there must have been some people in that film who you had to tell the joke to, and then they decided to go along.
And it was interesting because some people just, we would just break it down and give them the beats of the joke, and they go, "Oh, got it, no problem, see you tomorrow," And then other people just wanted to talk about it, like, wait, what this, and that was really fun. And that's what was going on with Eddie. Eddie was having fun with the idea of having just heard the joke and then trying to work his way through it.
Then you also heard a lot, I don't get it. Is there something to get, or is it just sort of the journey?
Well, I think that was a joke, the I don't get it. I mean, you're talking about South Park.
No, not just South Park, but I think Izzard said that as well, and maybe a couple others. Are you sure?
Izzard was screwing around with different punchlines,
yeah. I don't think anyone says it except the imaginary depiction of an 8-year-old boy.
When did you first hear it? I asked Paul, when did you first hear it, Penn?
I think I probably first heard it told by Gilbert Gottfried, but I'm not sure of that because once I was told by Gilbert Gottfried, any other telling just flew out my head. Yeah. But, I heard Gilbert tell it many, many times. We're very good friends.
And was he the highlight for both of you, or did you have others in the film?
Highlight is such a tough word. When you work on something like this, you need to fall in love with every second of it, or you're a bad person. You're a bad artist. So there's a certain amount of discipline in loving everything. I think that for where it is in the movie and intellectually what it does, Taylor Negron is my favorite moment. Gilbert is the most skilled comic. I think anybody would agree with that. In the world, not in the movie, and ever probably. And I really like Paul Reiser being funny while talking about being funny, breaking it down during that. And I think that's, in a certain way, Paul Reiser is a very smooth microcosm of the movie. And I like that. You can't not like Otto and George, I like Eric Mead and Billy the Mime because they're so far outside of what people want out of this movie. I mean, that's the thing about this movie can be, with no studio money, can be so personal. I mean, do a little mental exercise and run through the movie and then picture a studio editing it, We'll put in more Robin Williams, less Gilbert Gottfried, what's the mime doing there? And that's what you see with every other movie. I mean, go see Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is another way to say go to hell in our culture.
Yeah, go to hell. That was that was Penn Jillette and also Paul Provenza.
Yes, my mic gone.
Your mic. That's a very good question, Ken.
Put me on number 4. You had the wrong mic on. Oh, zing.
No, I just put you on 4. So did you see The Aristocrats? They were obviously talking about the film The Aristocrats. It's going to be out on DVD soon.
Is it?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure when, but soon. I mean, it was in the theaters.
That's a movie that looked like it was bootlegged off the screen already, so I would have figured it would have been on DVD already.
But you saw it.
Yes, I did.
And what was your take on it?
I enjoyed it greatly. And you were asking me to think of what was my favorite one.
Yeah, because I was just asking these guys, Penn Jillette and Paul Provenza, who were the highlights for them? And he said Taylor Negron and Gilbert Gottfried. And was there any that stood out in your mind?
I like Gilbert Gottfried. Richard Lewis, I think I liked his. But I just like the whole process more than any individual one. I like seeing the sort of the whole comedian's process behind the scenes and that kind of stuff.
My favorite was Wendy Liebman.
Wendy Liebman. Yeah, she's good.
She took the opposite, so it was unexpected. Yeah. She went really clean throughout the joke, and then the punchline was really filthy, and that was good.
I think you had ruined it for me, though, already, so I knew that was going to happen.
I ruined it for you. There's another one.
Spoiler alert.
Hey, by the way, if these interviews that I'm playing tonight, they're transcribed, and you could follow along at home if you go to
Really? How would you do that?
comedycouch.com.
Yes.
And click on the interview sections, and they're all listed there. Next up...
Wow. Wait a second. I have a computer right here. Maybe I'll do that right now, and I'll follow along.
Follow along. Of course, when you're transcribing, you edit out some of the hems and haws and half sentences because
and the sounds of doors. You don't get the full audio effect because I can hear doors opening and closing and that kind of stuff.
That's why I have to play it on the radio as well. In case you have read it already, it means so much more when you actually hear it.
But when you hear it on What's So Funny?
What's So Funny? That's the name of the show, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yes, we're here every Sunday from 11 till midnight on CFRO 102.7 FM. And usually we have live in-studio guests, and we will again.
Did somebody die this week?
No, I've just forgot to invite somebody. Actually, no, we're waiting on Brent Butt to commit to a specific date.
Holding out all the dates for Brent.
That's right.
Keeping everything open.
Next
Such
week,
a big shot.
Yeah, it's true. Well, next week is a possibility, but he might have to do CTV press junket.
He might have to wash his hair, I think.
So, yeah, that's possible. He's just giving me the runaround.
Get his teeth capped,
So, but we have I've been waiting for a long time to play these interviews that I did out in Montreal.
We were going to do them earlier in the year.
A few weeks ago, and then the power was out, so we didn't get to them.
That's right.
In the Delta Hotel with Brian McKim, the male half of the publishing tandem at SheckyMagazine.com. Hi, Brian.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm a little tired, I got to say. It's Saturday night here. It's been a long week. My voice is a little deep and resonant from shouting all last night.
Oh, the exact opposite happens to mine from shouting. I sort of get shreddy, but and you were playing hoops today, so that was
and a little tired. Yeah, I gotta say I'm a little tired. Tell us what SheckyMagazine.com is.
It is a magazine that my lovely wife and I started April 1, 1999. We are both professional stand-up comics, and we decided to start a magazine about stand-up on the internet, and we did it, and it's SheckyMagazine.com, and we have been coming up here to Montreal for the past 7 Montreals. This is our 7th one, and what we do every time we come up here is we upload daily updates about the festival to our website so that folks can get an idea of what's going on up here, and we upload text and pictures, and nobody else does what we do.
Great in-depth coverage, too, and I just wonder, when do you do it? I mean, I see you here every time I'm not at a show, and presumably you go to shows, too, and you probably stay up late. I guess my guess is that you're getting up early in the morning to do this.
That is correct. A typical day, we arrived here at roughly 2 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. I went over here, got our press credentials. On Wednesday night, we went and saw a comedy film. We schmoozed here in the Delta bar until about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then went back to our hotel room. And we arose at about 10 a.m. after only about 6 hours of sleep, filed our update after about 2 hours of furious writing and uploading, and then went back into the fray. And that's pretty much our schedule. It's an intense 96 hours, but I'll tell you what, it's exhilarating, and we get it done, and people appreciate the hell out of it, and we take great pride in providing coverage that, like I say, I keep falling back on that. It really gives people an idea of what's going on. So it is grueling, but I'll tell you what, when we go home, we're going to go home on Sunday morning. We're going to take off here on Sunday morning, and we will be utterly exhausted. We'll be husks when we get there.
Did I hear you use the phrase "get her done"?
I used a variation on "get her done." Yeah, Larry the Cable Guy. We have an editorial policy. We really actually do like Larry. I think we admire him. In fact, we were just quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer, a major daily night reader paper. They did a piece on Larry because he's just done 2 sold-out shows at Atlantic City this past weekend, and they called us for a bit of insight into Larry. We said he's a tremendous comic. I do believe he is. He's a traditional comic in the mold of we compared him to Rodney.
What is your editorial policy you're about to say? Is it that you're just fair and open-minded to any form of stand-up?
Pretty much. We have narrowed our focus to stand-up. We love stand-up. We've been doing stand-up ourselves personally for, like I say, 20-plus years. And we just love anybody who makes an honest attempt to make folks laugh. And we've interviewed people as varied as Shelley Berman and Mitch Hedberg and Richard Lewis and Bill Engvall and Rusty Warren, Woody Woodbury, exactly. So we cover the gamut. Anybody who's professional and has been doing it for a while and is a veteran and knows what they're doing, we think that our readers are going to want to hear about it because our readers are savvy stand-up comedy fans who love the art and craft of stand-up.
So it's not just the hip, popular guys of the day. I mean, the title of the magazine itself is a tribute to, is it? I guess, Shecky Green?
It is and it isn't. You know, it's a funny thing about that. You know, it is called Shecky Magazine, and that is a definite direct reference to Shecky Green, who is a great comic, and was at one point the highest paid entertainer comedy-wise in Vegas. But Shecky, the word Shecky, the name Shecky has become sort of a generic term for somebody who likes to, you know, cut up and make merry and be a wise guy. So that's why we adopted it for the name of the magazine.
The magazine has changed format slightly. You used to have more columnists. Now it's more blog formatted. Is that correct?
Yes. In fact, it's a funny thing. We started in 1999, and I don't know if any, you know, the World Wide Web pretty much started in about 95 or so. So the whole technology was all new. So we realized that what we started in 99 was going to have to change by necessity, because as each new sort of bit of technology became available, we sort of tried to incorporate it into the magazine and keep it fresh, keep it new. So we went blog just about over a year ago, mainly in order to comment in almost real time on Last Comic Standing, which was a phenomenon at the time. The second season of Last Comic Standing had just started, and one of our columnists, Bonnie McFarlane, was a contestant on it.
She was my favorite on it.
Oh yeah, well, she was a lot of people's favorite. Bonnie has been responsible for a great tide of hits for us, because she has captured the fancy of the comedy public, and they love her. And the internet, people just do hits. People do searches on Bonnie, and they find her through us. Same thing with Mitch Hedberg.
And there are a lot of issues that you're covering, and you're not afraid to state your opinion on, for instance, a living wage for comics, or what are some of the other issues, or if you want to comment on that one.
Sure. Well, you know, it's a funny thing. Since we went to the blog format, what we've been able to do is we've been able to comment on things that are happening pretty much as they're happening. We're linking to columns, and we're linking to articles all over the World Wide Web. And one of the things that came up was the living wage thing in New York City. And we have definite opinions about this and that, about what a comedian deserves to be paid, or should be paid, or is paid. And we have, you know, if you read the magazine for any length of time, you get a handle on what we think and how we think about it. You know, that's just one of the many things. We talk about the image that comics have in the popular culture. We talk about the media and how they treat comedians. We try to take the media to task when they portray comedians as psychos or as miserable people.
Come on, some of them are. You got to admit.
Well, certainly, but no more so than, say, brain surgeons or cops or taxi drivers or anything like that. We're screwed up. Some of us are screwed up, but like I say, there's no higher concentration among stand-up comics as there are in any other walk of life.
Yeah, you and your wife Tracy are stand-up comics, as you mentioned. Have you ever played Montreal?
Oh my God, yeah. In fact, it's funny. We were driving up, listening to the radio on the way up here, and they said this day in history. They said 1986. This was last Wednesday when we were driving up to the festival here. In 1986, Sid and Nancy was released in the UK, and I said, "Oh my Lord!" One of our favorite films was Sid and Nancy, and the reason why was because we saw it at the Cineplex Odeon Theater in the Faubourg here in Montreal, as we were working for Ernie Butler's Comedy Nest here in Montreal. I said, "Oh my Lord, Ernie has essentially booked me here in Montreal since 1986." So we have been coming up here since 1986, and we've been very familiar with Montreal. We love the town, we love the food, we love the people, and it's been a great opportunity to come up here as media now for the past 7 years to cover this festival. So
almost 20 years of performing in Montreal. Have you performed at the festival?
Not officially. I think it was 2000 or 2001. We came up here for 8 days, a grueling 8 or 9 days, and Ernie had arranged for us to do some, in addition to our coverage, he had arranged for us to do some gigs here in the Montreal suburbs and in some clubs downtown for charity. And we did it willingly for charity, but I must say it was a grueling 8 or 9 days, and it gave us some insight into what these performers do up here. Some of the schedules they have these performers on are just ungodly as far as the It's just terrible. Sometimes they do like 4 or 5 shows in the space of 3 days, and they're dragged around. They do radio, they do TV, and they do interviews with people like you, and it's just it's torture. But we do it willingly, and we get high because of the adrenaline, and it's a wonderful place to be for 4 or 5 or 6 days up here.
How many festivals do you get to in a year?
It's a funny thing, festivals are popping up all over the place. We've done the Calgary Festival, we've done the Boston Festival, we've done the Chicago Festival was done 3 times, we've done Montreal 7 times. I might be missing a couple here and there. Oh, we did the Vegas Festival once. We're always open. What?
Aspen.
We have never done Aspen, mainly because it's in a remote area of the country and it's wildly expensive to go there and be there and stay there, and we're just not interested in spending all that much money in order to provide coverage. We don't have a budget.
And that's why you haven't been to Vancouver yet.
That is, well, yeah. And if Will's listening, we'd love to come up. But yeah, we'll definitely come up and do the Shecky treatment to the Vancouver Fest if the terms are agreeable.
Okay, you heard that, Will Davis. How's the Montreal Festival change? Is it still the biggest in the world? It's been taken over.
Undoubtedly, this is still the biggest festival in the English-speaking world. There is nothing else. Nothing else comes close to it. Aspen has. I don't even know if Aspen's come close, because Aspen doesn't really, I don't think, aspire to be as big or as sprawling or as comprehensive as this festival does. And I don't think anyone will for some time, because I don't think anybody has the energy or the situation or the business model to compete with it. It is quite spectacular in its scope.
Hasn't industry sort of now favored Aspen? It used to be they'd all come to Montreal, and is it changing slightly now, do you think?
I really can't speak to that, because I as observant as we are and as much information as we have, I'm not quite sure that the industry favors one over the other. And I think that like all things, it's cyclical. And I think that Montreal, although it may be a little tiny bit quiet this year, like I say, I think it's cyclical. I think it follows the business cycles, but not exactly. By that I mean that stand-up was in a downturn for a little while, maybe in the 94-95 period, and then it came back. But I don't think that Montreal necessarily follows that rigidly. In other words, I think I think that stand-up has never been in a better position than now, but I don't think that Montreal is going to exactly shadow that. In other words, I think 2 years from now, I think Montreal will be bigger than ever.
So there's a real resurgence now in stand-up comedy? Not quite like the boom they talk about in the 80s.
Without a doubt. No, actually, I do believe we've kept a handle on it. It's largely anecdotal evidence. I mean, we're not very analytical as far as numbers and business are concerned. I think we're largely, like I say, anecdotal. I think that the stand-up business right now is at or near its peak in terms of the number of clubs, the number of comedians working, the wages, etc., etc. I think it's actually back. I think it's back and bigger and possibly even better than ever.
Wow! And at the festival this year, anyone? One of the reasons you come up is to find out, see performers from all over the world, ones that you might not have seen elsewhere, or what is your primary focus in coming here?
Our focus in coming here, like I said, is to give our readers an idea of what the festival is all about, what happens up here, what it's like. And I'll tell you what, this year, oddly enough, we went and all we did was see films featuring stand-up comics or by stand-up comics, and we didn't see one live performance this year. And I don't think that JFL is going to revoke our press credentials next year, because in our coverage, we don't just talk about the things that we personally experience. We talk about things that we hear about. We talk about the people that we run into. We talk about the people that are depicted in our photographs, et cetera, et cetera. So we give a comprehensive view of what's going on up here, even if we can't get to each and every show. And case in point is this year, we really haven't even gone to one live stand-up show. We have seen 4 movies, but we haven't seen one live stand-up show. But we still are going to give people an idea of who's up here, why they're up here, and what's going on.
So you're gossip mongers is what I'm hearing.
Well, but we experience it all too. I mean, we're here. We're here. We're live. We know what's going on.
So you've seen the Aristocrats?
Yes, we have.
And your opinion, Brian McKim.
We had a wonderful time, and the folks at Think Film went out of their way to get us seats in the house, and we had a wonderful time. And I'll tell you, we wrote what we think is the definitive review of the film, and it's up there on the upload. Yesterday's upload, as a matter of fact. So hop on and check it out. Never give up an opportunity to pump the magazine.
Oh, definitely get on there and read the review. But so you're not going to thumbs up or thumbs down in a nutshell?
Oh, definitely thumbs up. Oh, without a doubt, it's beautifully done. I mean, Paul Provenza had a vision, and he followed through on it. Penn Jillette from Penn & Teller helped him out on it financially. Another fellow that we've just met for the very first time. We conversed with him via email, but met him for the very first time in the flesh this week. That's Emery. He's a comic who edited it, and we've had the pleasure of working with many of the comics who have featured it in the past, and we've met a couple of people who have featured it this week, and it's just been a real blast to be able to be involved, at least on the periphery, in that film.
Is the joke funny?
Of course, the joke has a certain sort of internal logic to it, and it's irony, and it's the film is joyous, though. I must say, it's really fun to see comedians having a blast, and that's wall to wall. That's all it is. Comics having a blast. And if you love stand-up comedy, you will love this film.
Definitely, it's a real film for comedy nerds like us.
For sure. Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, Brian McKim, thanks for joining us here, and see you again.
Thank you.
What's So Funny? Sundays, 11 p.m. to midnight. An hour dedicated to probing the minds, the psyches, and the brains of the people who make the funny. What's So Funny? Sunday night, 11 p.m. to midnight.
Knock, knock! Who's there?
Okay, still at the Delta in Montreal at the Comedy Festival. I'm now here with Gary Gulman. If you're not familiar with the name, he was the pretty boy. No, you don't. You're going to walk now?
No, of course not.
On Last Comic Standing. That's probably where you're best known, right?
Yes, absolutely. I did a number of Tonight Show appearances and Letterman, but that was the first time anybody ever recognized me at the mall. So, yeah. And people recognized me in Canada, which was crazy to me. But
yeah, we speak English. I mean, you're in Montreal. You don't know that.
I just didn't know they would... that they watched that show, I guess. Because they don't have NBC here.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, well, we pick it up from the border. You know, I live in Vancouver, so we get it in the Seattle station.
Right. I see. All right.
But it's a hugely popular show, especially among comedy nerds, right? People who just love.
Yeah. I would have loved that growing up, watching that. I had to watch all the poorly produced A&E Evening at the Improvs and the Caroline's Comedy Hour. So it was well done.
And where did you grow up?
Peabody, Massachusetts, which is about 16 miles north of Boston.
So describe the experience of being on this show. It was kind of surreal. Like, was it a good representation, what the final product was after all the editing and that, of what really happened?
Well, I was very guarded. It wasn't a very good representation of what I really am. I'm up and down mood-wise. But when I knew I was on camera, I was always nice and polite and everything like that. So
some of them weren't.
Right. I think that some people were actually going further to have a certain persona and things like that. But I just wanted to be able to face the people that I grew up with when I went back home. So
I think that's what most of us think when we watch these reality shows. Like, how can you start crying and acting up when you know that the camera is right there on you, and you do have friends and family that are watching, right?
They always say, oh, you forget the cameras are on you and you just become... No, there was never a time where I didn't realize that at that point it would be being copied and seen elsewhere. Yeah.
Bonnie McFarlane, Canadian girl, who I really liked, and she got eliminated pretty quickly because she turned off a lot of the contestants.
I didn't understand that. It's one of my qualms with the show that pretty much my favorite comics on the show were eliminated early, like Bonnie, and Bonnie is objectively a great comic. She did The Late Show with David Letterman. No other person on Last Comic Standing did The Late Show with David Letterman. It's the ultimate validation for a comedian, and she did it, and she was the first one to be knocked off. So it almost made me feel that there's something wrong with the taste of the audience.
Well, definitely. You know, wasn't it in like a Las Vegas town? So you get like the tourists. Like who were the audience?
Yeah, I think there were tourists. Those audiences where we had those competitions, it was an audience coordinator, so it was pretty much put together from people who were at malls and at tourist attractions and things like that, and in and around Hollywood. So you get a broad section of America, but as we say in America, the flyover states, the middle of the country, which is what counts, I guess, as far as ratings. But they have very different tastes from the bookends of the United States. I'm sure Vancouver is a lot different than some of your more rural areas in Canada.
Definitely. So you were playing in Middle America, and I mean, you did very well. How far did you get?
I came in third. I call it second runner-up because I get to use the word second, and some people get confused and think I came in second, but I was actually third, but second runner-up.
And I'm not just sucking up to you because you're sitting here in front of me, but after Bonnie left, you were my favorite on the show, and maybe it was also because of just your demeanor, your polite demeanor, and trying to get along, and not being in a faction, you know, like. We all had our favorites.
Right. Well, the thing was is that I was friendly with Bonnie and Todd before the show, and I didn't want to vote against them because we were sort of friends. So I avoided that, and then everybody else voted for them, and before I knew it, I was alone. They'd all been eliminated, and then I was the next one to be challenged and things like that. So I have really fond memories of it. It was something I'll always look back on fondly. Of course, if that's the peak of my career, I'll be a bitter old man. But for now, I'm very happy about it.
And did you make any friends on it, or conversely, make any enemies? Like, are there some of the comics that you just wouldn't talk to if they walked down the hall right now?
Interestingly enough, I've seen Kathleen Madigan several times in the hotel, and she hasn't really said hello to me or anything like that. And we never even had a real blow-up, but I guess.
And that's funny, because I thought she aligned herself with the Weasels, and yet she's such a great comic, so I didn't get that.
She's a wonderful comic, and Todd and I were actually, I remember we were talking about that. We said she really didn't align herself with the comics that were really of her level. It was interesting, yeah.
So was it what you expected going into it the first time?
Yeah, I think it was what I expected. I thought it would be a lot easier to control my emotions, but there were times in the house where I was really stressed out and nervous and things like that. I thought that I could maintain my composure throughout the thing, but there were certain votes and challenges that I had knots in my stomach. So I really, I went in there saying, oh, whatever happens is meant to be, and I'll be able to live with it. But when it came right down to voting, I was very nervous and everything like that.
Now, it was canceled right before the end of season 3. Is that correct?
They were doing a season 3, which was actually season 1 versus season 2, and before the final episode, where they would do the reveal, they canceled it and wound up showing it on Comedy Central, which is a basic cable company in America, but a lot of Canadians probably didn't even know the results of the...
No, unless on the internet we found out that was the one Alonzo Bodden won.
Alonzo Bodden, yes. Bodden. I call him Bodden. I think that's what he goes by, yeah.
So how has it affected your career?
I'm not that much funnier than I was before that show, but the same clubs that I used to call and never hear back from now make offers, and I headline at them. I couldn't even get hosting or middle MC spots at these clubs, and now I headline them and share the ticket receipts. So it's a big difference. And I've worked since last August when the show ended. I've worked every weekend except for Christmas and a weekend in June. So.
Now, you're a good-looking guy. Well, I was talking to a couple girls yesterday who were saying that, most comics are really not, for whatever reason. And but here at Montreal, there's a lot of industry, and they look for a certain look. They look for a handsome guy to put into their series or movie or whatever. So you getting interest that way?
I originally came here in 1999, and that year... And then 3 out of the next 5 years, I got development deals to make sitcoms with networks. So yeah, I have seen that side of it. But what they don't tell you is that they order several. I mean, maybe 25 or 30 each year, and only 2 or 3 get on the air. much to my chagrin, it's funny because the reality shows help me because I got on one, but it also hurt me because there's less sitcoms on now. So it's a double-edged sword there.
So any other acting in your future, be it movies or TV or drama?
Yeah, I think that I'll continue to strive for that and audition and take acting lessons and try to work on that aspect. It's much different from doing stand-up comedy by myself, but I think that if I get the right training, I could be at least competent as an actor.
Something to strive for, competence. Is it harder to write as the more success you achieve? In your stand-up, I'm talking.
I think that the thing about writing is it never gets any easier. There's never a time where I remember reading something and the only thing I can compare it to is being sort of a poet. I mean, much less significant, but in that there's a rhythm to each joke, and you need an ending and a sort of a through line, and there's a lot of bad ones for every good one that you write. I don't know how many notebooks I have that I could go through and maybe find 2 or 3 germs of inspiration in there and just another 199 pages of just crap. So I continue to tweak jokes that I've been doing for 4 or 5 years and trying to make them work. So it never gets any easier. I guess some guys find their stride as far as writing, but for me, the same amount of time it used to take me to write a good joke, it pretty much is the same as it is now.
And so once you get a certain level of recognizability, recognition. There we go. Once you get that, is Montreal that important, or is it just a good hangout with the other comics?
I think that Montreal has a potential to change careers and really catapult people. I've heard that it's not the same as it once was, but I think if somebody can come up here and really blow everyone away with their uniqueness or improvement or things like that, I think they can still get a lot of heat, as they say, off it and make some moves in show business. But it's also sort of it seems to be like an all-star game. Very competitive people, and it's nice to be in that situation where you're being compared to other people and either favorably I guess it motivates me to work harder and really come to give my best performance every night.
Have you ever played Vancouver?
I've never played Vancouver.
Are you gonna? Can we expect to see you sometime?
I would love to play up there. It's just a matter of club owners and I guess audience members can request comedians without being. They should try not to be pests, but I have gotten in there because certain people have requested me. But I would love to do like a tour of Canada, maybe with the Just for Laughs. If they would have me on something like that, I would be very excited about that. So hopefully I'll get to Vancouver within the next 6 to 9 months. Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing you. Thanks for being our guest.
Oh, thank you guys. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
That was Gary Gulman at the Montreal Comedy Festival, Just for Laughs. Our hour is come to an end. That's it? Alonzo Bowden, sorry we got to bump you, but maybe another time. We're here every week with Kevin Smith and I, Guy McPherson, 11 o'clock till midnight. Tune in. You never know who's going to be the guest on this show. We had an all-star lineup tonight. Paul Provenza, Penn Jillette, Brian McKim, and Gary Gulman. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.